Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am.
Yes, sir. The video is live on YouTube, and with my greetings and with my
Thank
well
you, ma'am.
wishes, please go ahead.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Before we get started, I would request all the participants to please put off your mics and videos off for better connectivity. I would also like to request not to flood the chat box with any kind of good evening, hello, or any introductory messages because in between you might lose an important information. Your active participation is required throughout the presentation. And for any kind of query or any doubts during the presentation, after the presentation gets over, you can ask the question by unmuting yourself or you can type your question in the chat box. Once again, I would like to remind you all that we all are live on YouTube. Good evening, everyone. I, Saurabh Gupta, Assistant Professor, BBD University, School of Management, Lucknow, welcome you all to the international webinar on Every Crisis Creates an Opportunity when it is a good time to start a business. First of all, I would like to express my sincere gratitude towards our chief patron for providing me an opportunity to organize this international webinar. I'm also thankful to Dr. Sushil Pandey, Dean School of Management, BBD University, to entrust responsibility and guidance to organize this webinar. We have with us today Dr. Juliana, who is an enterprise educator, an award-winning social entrepreneur, and an experienced mentor who holds a PhD in business management from University of West London and is currently a lecturer in entrepreneurship at Kingston University. She is also head of the partnership at Sales School of Business and leads on the Accelerator Launch Program at UCL in 2016. Dr. Juliana was named top 100 most inspiring mentor in UK by Sunday Times and the Center of Entrepreneur. She has won Croydon Business Award and was also included in Vice 2020 Inspiration List, Women of Inspiration, 100 Social Enterprise Leaders showing COVID who is boss. Dr. Juliana was also featured in Migrant Entrepreneurship Report 2016, published by IOD, and in Alison Rose Report on Female Entrepreneurship 2019. This was a brief introduction of our distinguished speaker. Now I would like to invite Dr. Juliana for her rich insight for the webinar. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much first of all, it's really an honor to be here. Welcome everybody. It's fantastic to see such a fantastic crowd. And thank you for the introduction. So I'll just make sure, hopefully technology will be with us. I will start present. I think somebody's mic is still on. If it's possible, please mute yourself.
Yes, ma'am, they are. Sorry for the inconvenience, ma'am.
No problem at all. Okay, can I just get the confirmation that you can see my slides?
No, ma'am, we are. Yeah, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. We can see your slide. Please go ahead.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. So welcome to this presentation, and I hope it's not just giving information examples, but also it triggers some thinking and some conversation as a part of this discussion. The presentation will focus on, I think, a very interesting topic, a very present issue right now, with lots of people asking themselves, and it's focusing on actually, is there a business opportunity out there? And when is a good time to start a business? So I will come back to that question during the presentation. As Desk already explained, I am wearing several hats. I'm an academic, got a PhD in business management. I do lots of lecturing in Kingston University around enterprise innovation, small business development, entrepreneurship, and I also lead for the business school students' startup activities. And I'll share some of the things we do at the university to promote enterprise entrepreneurship and really to empower younger generation to get engaged. But on the other hand, I'm also a practitioner, and I think that's quite important when you just have not only an academic background, but also as a practitioner, you can bring what actually happens on the ground with the businesses. I've been running a social enterprise for the last 11 years. It's called My Outspace, and it's focusing on supporting female entrepreneurs, specifically from disadvantaged backgrounds. Won several awards, which I'm proud of, particularly most latest one, a Women Inspiration, top 100 social enterprises in the UK for the specific work which we've done, my team have done, within the last year since the pandemic started. Now, what I thought will be quite useful probably to our audience today is, before I get into various frameworks and kind of things that you might find useful, I thought I'll give you a bit of a background in terms of what small medium enterprise means, how it's defined, and actually give you a bit of understanding of what happens in the UK specifically. So small and medium enterprise definition around the world differs. In the UK, it's broken down into micro and small medium enterprises, and it's defined by a number of employees, a turnover, or a balance sheet. In terms of number of employees, if we look into micro business, it's under 10 employees. If we look into the small business, it's under 50, and the medium business is under 250 employees. Now, what's really interesting, now knowing that definition, I think is a graph I'm presenting right now here, which provides you with some of the statistics across kind of for the last 10 years in the UK in terms of the number of small medium enterprises. And what you probably have realized very quickly now, that 99.9% of those businesses are micro or small. And that's quite interesting because, majority of the businesses are run by individuals like all ourselves. They're freelancers, they're sole traders, they're contractors. They have different names, but actually what they mean, they work for themselves. And that's what really drives an economy. And I think it's very, very important to just remember that of the state of the economy and how much influence and how much impact the small medium enterprises actually have on the economy. Now, last couple of years have been very, very challenging, of course. Since the pandemic started, it's triggered a different way of thinking and different behaviors from different partner groups. And of course, it's a triggered different way of understanding the economic environment and business environment. And it's definitely had a huge impact for the small businesses. So, for example, in the UK, you see a quick summary which has been published fairly recently by Enterprise Research Centre, which is focusing specifically on the impact of the pandemic. And it looks into different influences and different triggers of kind of negative and positive influences. And yes, lots of businesses has reduced turnover, reduced employment, and lots of challenges in terms of, what has happened to them. But it also had some very positive influences. And one of those influences actually thinking differently and really changing their mindset in terms of what happens around, how they analyze the information, how they approach it in their businesses. And if before things like, operations and business model were kind of set, now is the time to look at an innovation, not just from the perspective of the product and services offered to the customers, but also from the internal perspective of maximizing the efficiency and effectiveness of delivering their services to customers. And what it triggered, which has kind of become a term, it's triggered the COVID economy. And what's really interesting, so this is kind of based on the UK example, but it would be really interesting to get your ideas and reflection, from the Indian perspective to see if that's a similar or different. And what actually been happened is the number of businesses have actually increased in the same period if you compare period last year and 2019 and 2020. There are more businesses who've been set up in 2020 than compared to the year before. Yes, there is a normal natural increase, particularly in the UK, which is again triggered by the business support mechanism the government provides and lots of other things. but not so substantial. So it's been a really substantial increase, and that's really interesting. Now, some of the type of businesses you see on the slide, and might be no surprise to you whatsoever. Yes, of course, we need more disinfecting services. We need more medical services. We need to look into an e-commerce infrastructures, new technologies to deliver services in different ways. But actually, that's a creation, that's an opportunity which was out there, which triggered the creation of those new businesses. And that's really interesting, because there is a term in entrepreneurship, opportunity versus necessity. Some businesses are driven by their opportunity, by spotting those opportunities, but sometimes individuals are setting up a business out of a necessity. In fact, one of my businesses in the past was driven by necessity. I used to work for a very large corporation. Everything was fantastic, I was happy. And then I got married and I gave birth to my lovely daughter. And that unfortunately changed the circumstances not a very privileged way for myself, because the cultural values within the organization I worked for were not really aligned with what I thought the employment and sort of my line management and leadership should look like. So I was refused any flexible working arrangements. I was considered somebody who has to come to work despite if it's needed or not. And there was no even a conversation to look into different arrangements to meet the needs of both parties and be more productive. So as a result, I had to make quite a substantial choice. I left the job. I prefer to be with my family and stay with my child. But actually what it caught me in the situation that, financially it wasn't a straight position, a strong position to be in. So I had to find different ways to think how I can use my skills, my knowledge, my competences, maybe in a different setting. And that was a trigger. It was a trigger driven by the necessity to look into the opportunities where I can use my skills differently. Now, what I've realized that lots of other families like myself are exactly in the same position. So it's a hidden gems hiding somewhere else, have lots of expertise, lots of knowledge, but they are stressed, they're depressed, they lost their self-confidence, and they're staying in home mums or fathers, and they're really looking, they want to be intellectually engaged, but they don't have that opportunity because their employers didn't understand them. So one of my first ventures was to create a co-working space with the childcare provision and business support. So you can bring children to work, be able to engage with others intellectually, create value, and become financially sustainable as a business in your own right, working for yourself. So that's what the big difference is. And what is interesting, that quite a few businesses in the UK, within the pandemic time, were driven by the necessity. The individuals, if you might be aware, UK has something called a furlough scheme. It's for the businesses' employees who losing or not able to continue with their work due to the companies being closed. So lots of it in retail, for example, in the fitness industry, pubs, leisure, restaurants, etc., etc. So lots of people being furloughed, where the government covers 80% of their wages by staying at home and being able to go to work. And then hopefully when pandemic finishes and things will change towards more positive environment, they will go back to their jobs. And that created a very valuable resource. It created time. And time cannot be underestimated, how important it is. Time to think, time to reflect, time to create. And that in some ways really influences our mindset. And that's very, very important to have the time to be able to be alerted to the situations, compare things, reflect on things. And what is interesting as a result of that, a lot of it, even though it's out of the necessity because the situation created that environment, people start noticing opportunities and jump into those opportunities to see if there is a potential opportunity which can become actually a small business, an enterprise. So if kind of summarizing the picture of number of small medium enterprises in the UK, you can see very clearly how substantial increase has been, particularly since 2019 to 2020. So it's been a growth of 13.25%. in that year in terms of the number of businesses has been set up. Now, of course, we should not really underestimate the importance of not just setting up a business, but also understanding, why so many businesses fail. What is happening? What are the key influences? And provided a link to a really interesting report, Alison Rowe's Female Entrepreneurship Review, which has been commissioned by the UK government together with the National Westminster Bank to look at the comparison of kind of small, medium enterprises run by men and women, but then also look at the potential top reasons for why small, medium enterprises actually fail across all the industries and run by men and women. And as you can see on the slides, there are common reasons, which probably you can relate to, you've read about somewhere, but it's quite interesting that top of it is actually says no market need. So over 40% of businesses set up in the UK fail in the first couple of years because they were not meeting market need. And you would think it doesn't really make any sense, because why would you sell something that nobody wants? Why would you try to put so much effort, time, and money into something that's not going to sell? But that's where the biggest point of understanding if you actually have a business opportunity or not becomes so paramount. So it's really important to make sure that as you jump into those opportunities, or it's driven by necessity to look into opportunities, you're definitely making sure that there is a market need. But we'll come back to that point a bit later. A bit of inspiration. This is one of the businesses I've been involved in. It's actually been set up less than 4 months ago. So Quell, have a look at it if you have a time. But these guys got together and they thought, okay, they're very passionate about exercise, the fitness industry, and they came up with this fantastic idea, turning boxing into gaming with the actual, real impact of having boxing. And they couldn't believe how fast things been actually driven by realizing of what exactly their customers were looking for. Within a couple of months, they've got into Y Combinator, one of the first and most famous accelerators in the US. They've just raised over $3 million for their enterprise. And that's been driven by finding the passion, connecting the passion with the opportunity. But also coming back to my point earlier, 2020 is an interesting year. And an interesting year from all sorts of different perspectives. And a lot of the time, we associate in our conversation, in our reflections, we associate with the negativity. And sometimes, very often, we forget that actually there's lots of positive impact come up as a result of that year, while we're going through the potentially crisis situations. And what 2020 really forced to do is to disrupt or to be disrupted. You had to do something. Doesn't matter how small or substantial it is. Doesn't matter if you do run a business or not, but you had to reflect on it and make some action and make some changes within your own lives. And that's a really interesting change with a potential behavior. Now, what do we come back to? Something we very often forget about is the mindset. Mindset works in a wondrous way. And if we literally draw black and white line, we can talk about a fixed mindset and we can talk about the growth mindset. And actually the emphasis on understanding the differences and focusing on the growth mindset is extremely important in the current situation. And that's where opening your entrepreneurial awareness, and that's what drives you to see the opportunities, to support potential connections, to find networks, and then be able to introduce something new to create a value, something that creates a value in this world. So growth mindset is really an understanding and appreciation and being able to be in control of yourself from the positive perspective and really not looking at the negativity around the current situation, but turn it into the positive, turn it into an opportunity, turn it into something you can learn from, you can use, you can reflect on, you can create something from to go forward. Now, it also needs to be supported by various skills. And of course, there's lots of research done around what are the right skills for innovators, what is the right deal scenario, etc. But what is really important is to bring the mindset with certain skill in place to really be able to understand the context of the situation and therefore be able to reflect and see the potential opportunities out there. And very often it comes to quite the basic things. It comes into things like a curiosity, networking. You are here right now, you join this session, you're eager to learn, to understand, and hopefully be able to network with each other, which is the most powerful asset you will have in your life. And sometimes getting out of the comfort zone. Yes, you have to. This is the part of our journey. But that sometimes stops us. And what stops us is the fixed mindset. So if you are making sure that you follow the growth mindset concept and you keep reminding yourself about it, then you are more likely to open the world of fantastic networks, be more curious and see more connections, which then create potential opportunity which you will be able to address as you go along. Now, everybody has ideas. There are lots of ideas out there, dozens of ideas. And that's great, because we need ideas. But not every single idea will be able to create value in a way that actually will create a business opportunity. So opportunities are much more less common. And the opportunities are those who create a real value to the potential customer. It does involve a lot of sometimes work, of course, might need to be tested. What are the tools we can use to be able to look into the potential of assessment of understanding that opportunity can be taken forward. But it's all about looking into creating the value. And while we do that and keep growth mindset and being alerted to new opportunities, what is important to understand, and it links to one of the biggest problems why the businesses fail, if you remember from the list a bit earlier, that no one wants to buy a solution to non-existent problem. Okay? No one pays to solve a non-existent problem. And if anything you remember from this webinar, that would be a very important sentence to remember. Because it's all coming to being alert and understanding the concept and being able to communicate your problem to your potential customer in the best way forward. And sometimes as we do that, when we think, yeah, we understand the problem, we know about the desires, we know about pains and lacks, yes, we understand it. But then when we're trying to create a solution which we think address the problem, we use a different language. And I'm not saying language in terms of Indian, Pakistani, Russian, English. What I'm saying is using the words of those potential customers use. And that's quite a tricky part to do. And that's what makes a real business opportunity. To understand the problem, really understanding inside out, how the customer is experiencing that problem, and then create solutions which actually address those answers, cues, ways of satisfying in the best way forward for the customer. Now, you might have seen it, maybe not, but I thought I'll put it here, because as we're talking about the customer, as we're talking about opportunities and the right time to find those opportunities, I think it's really important to understand the context from the perspective of various research and various publications. And you may find this report by KPMG, which is focusing on meet your new client, meet your new customer, competing in the new reality, quite interesting. It's focusing on the concepts of understanding how that new customer potentially can look like and what that normal next customer may be really caring about. It probably wouldn't come to your surprise that a lot of elements you see on the slides are reflections and real influences within those spaces where the companies have to adapt, change, create something new, really try to investigate the customer needs as soon as possible to be able to create the value. Things like our work environments have changed. Our learning environment have changed. We do this webinar online, which might not be an ideal way for some of us. Shopping, consumptions, life at home, how that relates to our work environment. Play, entertainment, that's completely changed. health and well-being, travel. All those things really highlight a very, very interesting points and triggers that reflection, understanding of your new customer. Now, some of the results wouldn't surprise you. You can see on the screen, but at the same time, it's very important to really understand the trends and understand the future. So reflect on the past, but also understand the future. And that's the best position to be in, to be able to create something of value, which not necessarily will be only for today, but it also will be viable for tomorrow. Another interesting report focusing on innovation in crisis. So it's particular in the current situation. It's been published late last year, and it's talking about what is more critical than ever in terms of for the companies and everybody else to innovate. And in some ways, McKinsey tried to put a formula. There is no perfect formula, but what they tried is to put it into an equation which can potentially become the value of the potential opportunity. And it is really interesting because nothing new is here. Nothing has changed in terms of what it means to bring an opportunity forward. But what has changed is the technologies, the perceptions, the behaviors of the customer, and really understanding the context to be able to put it in the best way possible in practice. So crisis is the crisis, yes, but don't waste the opportunity of a crisis. It brings a lot of very interesting opportunities and examples, and it makes you think differently. And while you think, you create ideas. And those ideas are a starting point of something very, very valuable. Now, within the same Addison Rose review report, what was really one of the findings, what was really interesting, is that UK is not really great at supporting female entrepreneurs. There's only about 30% of businesses which are run by women. And there's been a lot of conversations and emphasis of looking, what can we do to support more female entrepreneurship, more women to consider as a potential career pathway. And what they estimated is that the UK is losing £250 billion as an opportunity in the UK economy, but not supporting female entrepreneurship. £250 billion. That's the opportunity over there by making sure it's inclusive environment, a supportive environment, and a change the people's mindset to create a culture of spotting opportunities, looking at them, not being afraid of failing, and be able to see how they can potentially going forward. What also was very interesting that sometimes people may say, well, there is no money, you can't raise some finance, but actually that's not true. There is been an increase in business angels funding. So what you can see in front of you is the British Business Bank report which has been published recently. It does have some challenges and barriers, but has been a steady investment contribution to the economy to support early stage businesses and encourage entrepreneurship and encourage really thinking differently and spotting opportunities, connecting and looking at how you can develop something of value. So if you ask me when is the right time to start a business, it's never the right time to start a business. I always say it's never the right time to start a business or have a baby, because you cannot plan for anything 100%. In fact, I'm sure that majority of you who join the seminar wouldn't know exactly what would happen today every single minute since you wake up. It's impossible to plan, but it's important to keep an open mind, thinking about the growth mindset and being entrepreneurial alert to be able to spot potential ideas, see the connections and turn them into their opportunities. And that's very important. So unless you make that step, nothing is going to happen. We will be the individuals who always go to the lowest and combinator, who always complain about things rather than taking things forward. And unless we change our mindset and start thinking differently and really reflect on the context and reality, it will be quite difficult to convince ourselves, in fact, that it's the right time to start a business. So let me just have a look very quickly, if I have time, to connect it how things work in Kingston University and what do we do to encourage that. So Kingston University vision is supporting enterprise entrepreneurship as much as it possibly can across the whole curriculum. And in fact, Kingston University is the top university in the UK for graduate startup. So we have a wide range of services to be able to support each individual to make their ideas a reality. And that also reflects on the curriculum framework, which we follow every single course and every single module. Yes, we want to make sure it's accessible, but we also want to make sure that every single student can reflect themselves within the curriculum. It's important that it drives by the community, and it drives by the students for the students. But also it's about equipping students in the right skill set for global and diverse environment. Now, the support services in Kingston are divided in several sections, and they're focusing on developing the skills, developing their ideas, but also if you do have business ideas, then you have certain schemes of how you can take it forward and potentially grow your business. But the inclusion and diversity conversations are very important to us, because it's not only what we think is right. It needs to be co-designed with lots of different key stakeholders. Yes, students are some of them. Yes, members of staff. Of course, the university itself. But we put a huge amount of emphasis on the businesses, social enterprises in the community, local communities, and actually business support organizations, which are drive the support and drive the future of going forward. So my call to action to any participants on this webinar, if there is an interest, one of the problems we have...
Excuse me, ma'am. Sorry to interrupt you. Ma'am. Dhruv, can you please stop sharing the screen? Dhruv, can you please stop sharing the screen?
So, sir, please remove him. Remove him.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm trying to do that, but that particular... Okay, sir. Sorry for the inconvenience. Ma'am, please continue. Sorry for the inconvenience, ma'am.
And
okay, let me just make sure we've got this
and identify which class he belongs to.
Sure, sir. The action will be taken soon, right now itself. Sorry for the inconvenience, ma'am. You can please continue.
That's okay. That's okay. So just to say again, so as I mentioned, the core design is very important to us, and core design means not just the students and members of staff in the university, it's also local community, it's social enterprises, it's the businesses. You know, as you develop your ideas, as you look at the potential opportunities, you really need to take in the context of all the key stakeholders involved. And that's not anything different from the educational sector we're all in. So as I mentioned, the call to action, if anybody is interested, we are setting up a global citizenship program, which is all about developing skills to become a global citizen and really looking at how you as individuals can create a positive impact in your own lives, in your own communities, and in businesses around the world. And again, within here, we're looking not just, of the skill set, but looking at the creating a certain mindset which you can take forward in your careers. We will doing things around sharing your passion, what are the tools and expertise you can have to make it happen. We'll be looking at how you present those ideas back to the companies, what are the solutions you're able to find, and then how you can actually make an impact on the journey. And what is also important to us is not just, again, for students and universities, it's for all the key influencers who drive the economy anywhere around the world. So it's your peers, your local communities, your families, any other social enterprises or businesses in the community, because that's what drives the change. Unless we all work together, unless we all come together to look into global challenges, to have a growth mindset, and be able to open the mind to opportunities, it will never be the right time to start a business. It will never be the right time to really have an impact in your communities. So these are some of the partner organizations which we work very closely with. We're focusing on the discussions of that core design to create the different schemes we have and move things forward. And as a final, if anybody wants to get in touch, the event takes place on 18th of March. Please do get in touch. I would be very much interested to get you involved as an institution, or with a particular group on the course. Otherwise, thank you very much for listening, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. Now I would like the students to just unmute yourself, or you can type your questions in the chat box itself. If there are any questions regarding this particular presentation, your questions are most welcome, students. Okay, we have Conan Fatima. Conan, you can just unmute yourself and you can ask the question.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, ma'am. I have a
Good
question
evening.
for you. Ma'am, as a
Okay,
gist
please
of
go
this
ahead.
webinar, we got to know that the key to our personal and professional growth is innovative thinking. So, how do we develop that innovative or creative mindset in ourselves? How to inculcate that skill?
So Fatima, thank you very much for your question. Absolutely, you've raised something very, very important, because actually in the core of everything what I talked about is the way you think and the way you accept the world. Innovative thinking, creative thinking, growth mindset, all those key words are absolutely crucial. And in fact, if you look into the top skills that employees are looking for around the world, that's exactly what they're looking for. They're looking for future workforce to be creative, be adaptable, and understand the concepts, understand the context, but also make the right connections to drive the organization forward. Now, there is no an ideal formula of how you create those skills. But what I would say, that entrepreneurial alertness, the fact that you're attending this particular webinar and you're curious about things, the first step towards it. Now, you need to really think about not, putting yourself in maybe sometimes uncomfortable situations. A lot of ideas coming from activities and a way changing people's mindsets and behaviors are hackathons. So hackathons started, for example, as a kind of a tech events create a solution for tech problems. However, now it's involved in something completely new. It's looking at actually all the global issues around us and see how we can work together with people we might never met, within the circumstances we've never been before, challenging us to create the solution to those problems. And only when you put yourself in those circumstances, you really see how your mindset changes and how you think differently. You notice new things, you notice new connections, and then you'll find you have lots of ideas because you're able to make those connections and understand the context. So I hope that answered your question.
Okay, ma'am, thank you. So I think it is basically to learn and adapt new things from others, right?
It's putting yourself in a situation which might not be everyday routine things you're doing. So really thinking outside the box. If you work for an organization, in one department, for example, be curious, see what the whole organization does, how things connect and how you can contribute. If it's within your local community, see what's happening, look at their potential problems, look at their ideas you may be able to bring in to resolve that. So always focusing on the solution, always focusing on the positivity, rather than drive yourself into routine, negativity, things I know. So taking that away from yourself.
Okay, ma'am, thank you. Nice to talk to you.
Thank you for your question.
Okay. Ma'am, we have a question from Akash Tiwari. He said that how do we maintain the right kind of relationship and resources in order to start a new initiative, sustain ourselves to be a successful entrepreneur? I think he wants to ask about that. What is the key behind being a successful entrepreneur?
Okay, thank you very much for your question. You put a very, very interesting word, a very important word in your question, is relationship. Everything is based in relationships. So when I talked about the different type of mindset and networking capabilities, those are the key to success pretty much. There's lots of networks which are close ties, so those networks around your family, immediate friends, you know really well and you're comfortable with. But also the people you're comfortable with, open up the sort of weak ties, as they call them, in theory, which are connection of your connections. And you never, weigh more than 6 individuals before getting somebody who you really want to connect with. So networking should be really in your NDA. It should be a first skill you learn. And a lot of us might not be comfortable with it, and that's normal. In some cultures, we are very focusing on very close ties. We want, we're close to people we know. We want to work with people we know. And that's not a good way forward. You really have to expand your networks. And starting with your course, that's your big asset. These are the relationships you're building now, which then can move forward. Now, resources, the network is one of the big assets, but also there are lots of other resources. Now, what I always say, if you have come up with your idea and you're developing into the concept, make testing and further to the potential enterprise, commercial, social, you really need to ensure that you don't jump into deep end straight away. So in some ways, break down your project into smaller chunks and take one step at a time to really test and understand if what you're offering, what customers want. And if that's the case, fantastic. Then you can jump into the deep end. So I think in the beginning, just make sure that there's definitely a match between what you think the problem you're trying to resolve and what the customer wants. So if you remember one of the formulas I put in the presentation, that's the key to success. Okay, so lots of networking and make sure you understand the problem and the problem actually meets the needs of your potential customers.
Thank you so much, ma'am. We have a few questions regarding, ma'am, how can we scrutinize the strategy, generate sufficient profits and growth? That means they wanted to know about that. What is how can they scrutinize the strategy as to conceptualize on the aspects of profits and growth, and ma'am?
Okay, thank you very much for the question again. So you need to get to that strategy first. To get to the strategy, you need to go through quite a few different concepts to define them and find information to put them into the strategy. And that's very important because it's not about thinking about the strategy first. It's about really understanding the foundations of your idea first, as much as you possibly can. Now, what I always say that in your early stages, don't try to plan for 5 years. It's not going to work, okay? Anything can happen. Tomorrow might not be an ideal day. Something changes. So you really need to understand what's the longer term vision is. So that's important. But what are the key steps? So what's your initial market? Who is your initial customer? Does the customer actually want the product? How much would they be willing to pay for that? And then be able to build to see if there is a potential of profit and growth. Now, one of the tools you may find useful is called Business Model Canvas, which is really good because I think what you do before the strategy and what I encourage lots of entrepreneurs to do is think about the business model of how you're getting money in and if that actually makes commercial sense. Because a lot of, if you see the reasons why the businesses fail, the second reason was running out of cash. And that's not necessarily means that you don't get investment. It doesn't necessarily means that you don't charge the right price. It can also relate to how you get the money into the business. So understanding the customer journey, when the actual customer willing to pay. And then you can look into the strategic direction. Okay? So really understanding the customer journey, really understanding your business model inside out, then helps you to scrutinize the potential strategy going forward in terms of the growth.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for the question. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, I have a question for you. Can I?
Of course. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, ma'am. Thanks, ma'am. Ma'am, if you just want to define the new concept of entrepreneurship, if we say that there was a paradigm shift in the definition of entrepreneurship from the past few years, how will you define the entire concept in general, ma'am?
Okay, well, you're absolutely right. There are lots of different definitions. But I think probably the most simplified it is about identifying, assessing, and taking opportunities forward, because that refers to the entrepreneurial process, and that's what we go through. So coming back to the Fatima's questions, if you are able to go through that process in a rigor, you will learn so much. Particularly while you're at university, you're in a safe learning environment. That's an ideal thing to do, because you've got support from the staff, you've got support from your peers, and failure, it doesn't matter. It's the learning, it's understanding the process and going through that process. So it's not about creating a high growth businesses. It's about understanding the process, which then can be applied to anything in your work environment or in any kind of business concept you want to take forward as an entrepreneur.
Okay, thanks, ma'am. Thanks for the answer. Ma'am, Dr. Ritu has a question. What point should be taken in account when an entrepreneur start an education startup?
Dr. Ritu, I might need to get a bit of clarification, because obviously education startup can be defined by different things. So is it possible to get a bit more information?
Dr. Ritu, can you just elaborate upon your question? You can unmute yourself and ask it. Dr. Ritu, please.
Hello, good evening, ma'am. Ritu here.
Good evening.
I was just thinking about if we want to start an education startup where I want to actually benefit the students, not just with their topic wise or just theoretical knowledge, but they should be able to apply that knowledge in future, and also to make sure that they turn out to be a good human being also, that who are not just only looking forward to make money, but also looking forward to give something back to the society also. So while starting this kind of education startup, what points and what requirements should we take into account to apply this kind of objective in a new startup, where only student is not taught to only not to make money, but also to do something beneficial in return for the people around him or her also.
Thank you very much for your question, Dr. Ritu. Absolutely. I mean, somebody who's been running a social enterprise for the last 11 years definitely understands the value of social impact in anything we do, because that actually what really helps with building relationship. That's what really helps in expanding the networks and creating potential partnerships. Now, the education startup, any startups starting from a very basic, understanding what student wants. What is the student population, current student population, and maybe those whom I haven't gone to university yet. What are they really looking forward to? What triggers their decision to go to university? What things they would like to see as a potential part of their engagement? And it can be, it can be an app, it can be an event, it can be so many different things. But you really need to understand what is the issues they experience and how the problem defined, and then see how the education startup may look like. Does it make sense? One of the examples I'll share in the chat, if I may. So one of the startups I helped as well, it's called Museumia, and that's actually an educational startup. So they've been for the last 2 years, and what their vision was is to help families who might never be able to travel or access museums around the world, cultural things, all the artifacts in their lives through virtual reality experiences, and make it affordable, make it free to some of the subscription model in terms of different settings. And that's what their vision, to make an art education accessible to all around the world. So the education startup means so many different things, but it's starting from really understanding the problem, understanding what the users of that service, the customers, are really looking for. But I think it's also important to connect with the priorities, for example, in your country, and getting other stakeholders involved. What are the government priorities and community priorities? What student wants, and then what the education institutions want, and look at that triangle, then focusing on the need which benefits all parties and create a very strong partnership to drive those social values within the community.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your answer.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ritu. Thank you so much for the question. Is there any other question from the participants? Any more questions, students? Okay, so I think that we don't have any questions regarding the things. Thank you, Varish, man, for your. Yeah, Dr. Ritu, please.
Sir, Preeti Sharma has raised her hand. If she has any question, please.
Okay. Yeah, Preeti. You can just unmute yourself. Preeti, please unmute yourself.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, ma'am. Sorry, ma'am. Good evening. My question is what should be basic ideology in order to gain momentum in the entrepreneurial world?
So I didn't catch that question. Can you please repeat it? What
should be basic ideology in order to gain momentum in the entrepreneurial world?
Question. I think it's coming back to what we talked about in terms of the mindset. But you're absolutely right. The world has changed, and the world of work has changed so much in the last 10 years. You don't really see permanent jobs anymore. They're all contract based, they're part-time based. It's all driven by competition, by pushing yourself forward, and therefore being an entrepreneur in your own rights. And that creates a very different behaviors in the context, particularly in the current situation. And I think it's all coming back, and in fact, it's been supported by lots of research. And what we see as a result of entrepreneurial activities in our institution, that becomes a key asset for students leaving university, putting things in their CV, starting out. Majority of students starting their own businesses, is being entrepreneurially alert. It's have an open mind and a really growth mindset in absolutely everything you do, from the first moment you get off the bed. Yeah? And if you're able to do that, to bring that positivity, to bring the looking forward view, the future forward view, it will be an absolutely fantastic approach and a mindset in a work environment, in environments you have a business, in an environment supporting your friends and communities. It will be invaluable.
Okay,
so I hope
ma'am.
that answers the question.
Yeah, ma'am. I got it.
Thank you, Preeti. Okay, is there any other question from the participants? Okay, so I think that now the participants are quenched enough for the things. And ma'am, you have really explained the thing very well. Thank you very much, ma'am, for sparing the time. And really thank you. And thank you, Dr. Ritu. Thank you, Dr. Vimal, for your support. Without your support, this wouldn't have been possible. And thank you, Yana ma'am. This was really an inspiring webinar for me. And since I also take the subject entrepreneurship quite often, so it was just a learning phase for me, and I learned a lot, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. I hope it's been useful for everyone. Please keep in touch. Good luck with your studies. And
sure,
Dr. Ruta and Gupta as well. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And all the
Thank
best.
you so much,
We expect
ma'am.
you one more time, ma'am.
This was a very informative session, and I liked it very much. It was very useful for me. Thank you so
Yes,
much.
sir. Please say. Please, sir.
Saurabh, sir, am I audible?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I would like to mention over here, I'd like to say a big thank to Dr. Juliana. And there is one information that she was stuck with COVID. And she is very brave lady. She has defeated COVID. And we are very fortunate to listen to her. And I further thank Dr. Juliana for giving her precious time to all of us. And thought-provoking lecture. It was really a nice presentation. I was there throughout the session, but due to some difficulty in network, I was not able to organize, proceed this webinar. So thank you so much, Dr. Juliana. In future as well, I would like to have your expert knowledge about the subject.
Dr. Verma, thank you so much. Yes, I recovered from COVID, and I think it's important to say, stay safe, everybody. It's no one can predict it, no one can see it. and it's lots of difficult time for lots of families. So please stay safe, take it seriously. And again, Dr. Wilma, thank you so much for having me.
Thank
Thank you so
ma'am.
much, ma'am.
Have a nice day
you,
ahead,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Have a nice
Okay,
day, ma'am.
everybody.
Thank you, ma'am.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, ma'am.
Bye.
Ma'am. Bye, ma'am.
Bye.
Okay. Thank you. Saurabh sir, please request all the participants to just leave the meeting.